Live from Dog Lake Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, it's time for You Can't Brew That on Television. Now here are your hosts, Brewmeisters Kyle and the Reverend Ryan Bono.
Internet, and welcome to a season finale episode of You Can't Brew That on Television. We are your hosts. I am the Reverend Ryan Bono.
I'm Kyle, the Brewmeister LaPointe.
And we are coming to you for the last time in the year 2010. And for the last time, we're going to be helping you bridge the gap between beer snob and frat boy.
That's what we're going to be doing. We've got a really cool show. We're
pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. We're going to drink several different things.
Drinking a few different beers tonight.
Which is important. I hope you all brought your Suntory Premium. Suntory's original draft brewing technology brings you crisp, rich, and smooth taste. I can't read the rest of the Chinese symbols on there, but I'm assuming it's talking about how good the beer is.
I think it says white people drink.
Oh,
garbage.
White people drink this beer.
Right.
We'll drink our sake.
So we're going to be drinking Chinese beer is what we're getting at. This actually has been imported from China by a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. So if any of you are in China, we'll let you know what you're in for. We've got some trivia.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, if this beer hurts your child in any way and you talk about it, you will be jailed.
That is true.
So just
I read that somewhere.
But the other thing we're going to be drinking is Coop.
Coop Native Amber, and we're very excited about this.
Yep.
We've never had this particular Coop,
You're
going to get a very candid review of it. But we have had many beers by the Coop Brewery. Very, very candid brewery. Thank you. But we have had many beers by the Coop Brewery and enjoyed them all. So we're really looking forward to this one.
Is a phenomenal IPA.
F5, really yeah. I had their Oktoberfest this year and got pretty silly on it because I loved it so much.
They've got I believe a quadruple that was really good.
Yes. Or
it may have been a double. I had both.
It was some sort of Belgian.
Yeah, they had a Belgian dark beer, so usually double or quad.
Kyle went and toured the Balcones Distillery this weekend. We're going to look into that a little bit.
Great time. Lots of fun. Got some whiskey casks to age some of our beers on. We're excited.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, they're really nifty.
What else are we going to talk about? We've got a brand new sketch for you tonight. We have a brand new segment for you tonight. We have an iPhone correspondent, the Honky.
I would have appreciated a sketch.
I would have also appreciated a sketch, but
put the wig on.
Maybe next time. I think Faulkner is supposed to help us with that.
Oh, yeah. They refer to those as artist renditions.
Thank you
for law enforcement
that
purposes.
And we have put the finishing touches on the Brew and Bowl recipe, and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight.
And if you want, it's available online, www.doglakebrewery.com. It's on the main page. You can scroll down, and it says 2011 Brew and Bowl Scotch Ale recipe, and that's the recipe we're going to go by. We've gotten it reviewed by one of the guys who was key in helping come up with the recipe, and if you guys want, go look at it right now. And if you guys are home brewers that are watching, or if you guys have any input one way or another, feel free to mention it during the show. Say, hey, why don't you add hops here, or why don't you add this grain, or maybe we should increase this grain. Whatever you guys think. I mean, this is your beer as much as it is ours. So we're going to brew this, and I want to see some input on the recipe if we can get it.
Absolutely. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. I mean, in the meantime, we're going to be trying this Suntory beer from China. As you can see, it's a lager, so you're expecting it to be clean and crisp, but very low on malt or hop flavor.
It's got a little sulfur aroma to it.
Yeah, a little bit of sulfur coming out of there.
It's okay for a Pilsner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad deal. You notice, like, if you ever have, like, a Pilsner Urquell or any of the actual Czechoslovakian style Saaz hopped Pilsners, they're going to have that sulfur character.
Yeah, and this definitely has some Saaz hops in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crisp. It has kind of an interesting finish. It's not the finish I was expecting from it.
Very fruity.
Yeah.
And that tells me that they probably fermented their lager at a very ale yeast. Does this say it's a lager?
No, that was the assumption it might say it if you can read Chinese.
It's strictly supervised by Suntory Limited, which apparently does not make children's toys.
I think you might be onto something. This might not be a lager.
No, I think it's an ale. I think it's essentially a cream ale, basically a Pilsner. I
think you're right. This does have kind of like a, what is that, Genesee?
Genesee, yeah.
Yeah, this almost has like a Genesee type cream ale type of flavor. This is really, I did not expect this.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I expected like a Chinese Budweiser, but this is really enjoyable.
I wouldn't call it like great, not something I would drink a whole lot of, but
No.
it's got character.
Yeah, it's got a lot more character than I was anticipating.
Tastes malty. Tastes like they actually added some real ingredients. I don't know for sure, but
Yeah.
it's tough to tell. And speaking of cream ales, we had mentioned this before. Bono is really worried that I'm going to set him up here, but in one of our season finales or beginnings, I can't remember which one, we've discussed several times about English and
it's come up more than once.
Yes,
let's just
Irish,
say that.
and it was a bitter feud over whether or not cream ales were a specific definition. We both had our sides. Bono was saying a cream ale is essentially anything with nitrogen,
and he was saying that I was wrong.
And I was I took the side
to say that I was wrong.
I took the other side, which was that Bono is not right. In fact, we made a website all about it. www.bonoiswrong.com.
This dispute did sort of launch the website, didn't it?
This was probably the
it was certainly the driving force.
Because we couldn't find any answers to this. We didn't know. And so we started asking people, and he found an answer from one of the brewers over there in Scottish land. And I went and looked and did some research and actually communicated with a few more breweries, people who make some of the higher profile beers over there, and I was indeed wrong. That is basically the thing that they do over there in the greatest Britain that there is they call things with nitrogen in them cream. So if it's a red beer, it's still a cream ale. If it's a Guinness Stout, it's still a cream ale. It doesn't matter as long as it's got nitrogen on it. I was shocked.
Why am I waiting for the other foot to fall? Let's get to the trivia.
All right, the trivia, Rich.
Let's do it. Your trivia, Bono. The Scottish and Scotch ales were denoted with shilling designations based on taxes levied. The 60, 70, 80, and 90 shilling taxes were based on what amount of beer?
I should know this because I just read a history of English beer, which of course covered Scotland and Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I'm going to go with, because they didn't drink it by the pint back then. That's a relatively new phenomena. So it would be an English unit of some sort.
It's also important to know what a shilling is compared to what another, denomination of money might be, but I don't think you do. I didn't know until today when I did some more research.
I'm going to go with a barrel. I'm going to go with 67, 80 shillings per barrel.
And Richard, we're going to go ahead and give him half credit on that.
Give him the win? All right.
We'll give him the win on that one. It's one hogshead, which is an English. Well, they make them in America as well, but that's the designation for a barrel. And yes, you're right; it is a full barrel. And a hogshead is 63 imperial gallons, which is about 76.
So basically, an antiquated barrel.
Right.
Like what barrels used to be.
Big barrels.
Big barrel. Okay, cool.
And one of the things, I'll just talk about this while we're here. I did some research and tried to come up with some unit cost and time value of money type calculations. And I shot this from the hip, so this is by no means something that was really accurate. But essentially, I did the math on that, and you're talking for an an American pint of beer. For what we're making right now, our strong Scotch, about 75 cents an American pint.
And that's really kind of extraordinary because the one constant in European beer culture, specifically British beer culture, is that taxes, essentially, especially in the last century or so, on beer have just absolutely skyrocketed, like to the tune of 200 or 300%. So you think that's what they were charging back then?
Yeah. And I ran these numbers based on it's Thanksgiving coming up, so I'm talking time value of money based on when our country was founded. This was 1776 that we're getting these taxes, and
that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's a fairly substantial tax.
When you think about how much we're going to be paying to make this beer, it's not that much further off than our cost.
Certainly not.
So we're making a pint of beer. Yeah, for maybe a little more than that, maybe $1 at the most for a pint. But it was pretty shocking to run those numbers. And I ran them a few times in a couple different scenarios, and I'm fairly certain it was at least 75 cents. It could be more depending on what's going where, but
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about Balcones Distillery?
Balcones?
digging into some native amber. I downed my Chinese beer because I couldn't wait to get to this.
All right, I did the same thing. I was very intrigued by our visit. We did a special tour with our Cap and Hair Homebrew Club. We always talk about homebrew clubs and how good they are to join. And if you got a good one like the Cap and Hair, we do great events just like this. We organized a field trip. I mean, you got a bunch of grown people carpooling down to Waco, Texas, where they have opened the first legal operating whiskey distillery in Texas since the Prohibition, which is pretty darn cool. It's interesting to think about. I mean, Texas being a frontier country, I'm sure they've had stills in the area for a long, long time. But in this case, it's legal and quite expensive. I was shocked. First off, I'll say that the metal smithery that the guys do over there, almost everything they've done in there was stock sheet metal, stainless steel vessels that they turned in from other things. They hammered and molded and sweated and welded all of their copper vessels, which was, I mean, when you see what they've done, you just normally don't do that outside of a factory, and they've done it all themselves. It's really cool. What they do is essentially what a craft brewer does. They start with really good ingredients, and they use smaller batches, so they're able to control what they're doing to a much higher degree, and so they make really good stuff. I mean, I was flabbergasted with how good that stuff was. I'm not a huge liquor fan. I don't usually go that way away from beer, but occasionally.
I'm with you. And when I do venture away from beer, I pretty much stick with whiskey. Whiskey's it's a really logical next step after beer.
It's distilled beer,
especially like the darker. The whiskeys get really dark and complex.
Oh, and they're just like beers. I mean, there's Scotch whiskey and what they make in America, and they've got an all malt whiskey, and they pulled several of their examples. They made what was called a rumble, which technically would be closer to a rum than a whiskey, but tastes much more like a whiskey. Uses like figs and dark honey and maple syrup and some other things in there that just it just throws out a flavor that when it's done, you're like, wow, they're aged in the oak casks, and they use these smaller oak casks, so 5-gallon instead of a giant hogshead like they would for whiskey over at Jack Daniel's or somebody like that. And so ideally, you're talking about surface area of, this is something that I learned from them that, I didn't think about, but surface area makes a big difference when you're doing things like that involve leaching of woods and stuff. So I'm thinking surface area is internal surface area. That's not necessarily true because the wood is porous. So
that makes sense.
As it's expanding during the heat of the summer or whatnot, it's going to push through those pores, and as it's coming and shrinking back, consolidating during the cold months, it's going to pull back through. And those expansions and contractions are what make the aging process on a beer, on a whiskey, makes them better. So like a 12-year-old Scotch or an 18-year-old Scotch will change because of those differences on the oak barrels. In these smaller barrels, the amount of basically surface area of wood touching the volume of the liquid,
it seems like it would skyrocket.
It's much higher. Plus, because you're talking about such a small amount of liquid, it's able to heat and cool much quicker.
Oh, that makes sense too. I hadn't thought
so
of that.
It can go through many more seasons than you can with a full-size barrel. It's going to go pretty much through one season a year. It's going to go to the hottest part of the year. It's going to go to the coldest part. But with these barrels, it goes much quicker. So I believe they said in about a 2 or 3 month time span, they essentially have cheap whiskey. They essentially have 2-year-old aged whiskey in 2 to 3 months.
That's pretty cool.
And in 6 months to a year, they have, 6-year to 10-year type aging process. And
especially for a brand new distillery, that's very important.
They've only been around since March of 08.
Yeah, you can't sit around for 18 years waiting to make your first buck.
There are a lot of defunct Scotch manufacturers in Scottish land that are basically being bought. People are buying the different distilleries that went out of business because they take 12 years before they can sell a product. So it's not a very good way to do it. But with these guys, they spend a little more money up front. And you're talking their cheap, bottom-of-the-line corn whiskey, which was actually like blue maize from New Mexico that they roast and they do all this. I mean, phenomenal stuff. Even their cheap stuff was really good. And it's about $35 a bottle. $35 a fifth, I think, is what we paid. We went and got one at the local liquor store.
Cool.
And I mean, it's well worth it. You're talking about a bottle of what, like Gentleman Jack, or one of the good whiskeys from one of the higher touted names. Excuse me, like Jack Daniels. Their Gentleman's Jack is going to be something like $25, $30. So that's good stuff too. I mean, I don't mind it, but this whiskey was much, much better.
Well, good.
So, I appreciate it. We're going to make a beer and put it in this cask now, and that's why we bought a cask from them, a used cask, because they can only use it once, because once the oak releases its flavors into the whiskey, it's pretty much done for whiskey. But that oak and the whiskey inside the oak
used for beer
can really add some flavors to a beer. So
yeah, so I think the problem is going to be picking only one beer to put in there.
The other thing is there's ways to recharge those casks. We'll do an entire episode on that after I do some more interviews with people.
Cool.
One of the guys in our brew club, maybe I'll get him on. He's actually had one of these smaller casks.
Live interview.
And he's recharged these casks, as it's called, and made them ready for another recipe. There's other options like turning it into an open barrel and putting it out in the barn and making it a lambic barrel. You know, there's other options you can do to constantly reuse these things.
Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the coupe first before we jump into the iPhone bit.
This is a damn good beer.
I'm very thrilled with this beer.
I'll say it's probably a little bit higher on the hops.
It's a lot higher on the hops than I was anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's not bad.
And ambers are allowed to go to a high level of hop character.
It adds a really, really nice just fullness to the flavor.
But it's it's a little bit of pininess in there. It's
some piney hops.
But it's definitely some citrus in there too. It's just more back note. The flavor hops that they use are more of a piney variety.
Yeah, I was just thinking that you don't catch much citrus in the aroma.
No, it's and I love that. I mean, the good piney hops are just wonderful in a beer, especially something like this where you're trying to accentuate caramel and bread type flavors. Pine just goes well with it.
And there's some definite biscuit in there, I think. Some definite
I would agree
caramel.
with that. Mm-hmm.
It's a very nice. It's very complex. It's a very nice, well-rounded beer. I mean, this is the kind of beer you can drink an awful lot of.
Yeah, and I'd say, if anything, it's probably a 60-40 to the hops.
Yeah, I would say so.
To a good note for people who like hops. If you're not a hoppy beer guy...
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're not a hops person, it might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, you may be steered away from it a little bit.
But we're the type of people that drink Ruination, so we're not really scared of hops.
Out of the bottle, too, with a straw.
Yeah.
And the only way to drink Ruination. And I think they should make a drinking game out of that to see who can do that the quickest.
That's a good idea.
We should try that on the show.
I was just thinking that'd be a good segment. For the frat boy episode.
See whether the frat boy or the
we've got a lot of really cool stuff coming at you next season, so be sure to stay tuned.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And speaking of cool stuff for next season, this is a premiere. We're about to introduce a premiere of a new segment featuring Honky, the iPhone correspondent. We might change his name because he might become just a general correspondent, just a regular contributor to the show, but he's starting off as an iPhone correspondent, so let's see what the Honky has to say.
Hi, it's Honky, the iPhone correspondent for You Can't Brew That on Television, and I'm here today to review an app named Beer! Beer! is a database app designed to help you keep track of all the beer you've been drinking on your phone. You start out by typing in the name of the beer and then selecting its style from a pretty extensive list. You can then give it a rating from 1 to 5 stars and then type in a note or description. Now, if you're like Kyle or Bono, this is probably something meaningful like hoppy with a slight malt flavor. If you're like me, it probably says something more like, don't ever drink this beer again. You can then go on to add more information such as its price and alcohol by volume percentage and the brewer and how many you consumed. You can even take a picture of the beer for posterity or in case the label's written in Hungarian and you need to go figure out what it was you were drinking the next day. You can also search through the database that you have in case you want to figure out if you had this beer 6 months ago. Or you can even see the beers that other people are drinking and submitting along with their ratings and descriptions of the beer. On the last tab, you can back up and restore the database from your phone to one of their servers or export it to an Excel spreadsheet. You might want to consider doing this. Most of the low ratings that I saw for this app said that it does have a tendency to lose the database or beers out of the database, so keeping a backup might be a pretty good idea. But in the end, I can't argue with the fact that it is free and available in the App Store today. So you might want to give it a try. It's got a much better memory than any of us, especially after we've been drinking. This is Honky, the whitest kid you know, signing off for You Can't Brew That on Television. Happy drinking, folks.
All right.
That was the Honky, and everyone
so
please
much,
give
man.
it up to him because he did a fantastic job with that segment.
Putting
and
together that
Rich did a
segment.
fantastic job producing it. We've been just thrilled to pieces.
We've got several more of those in the can, ready to go. Next season, we'll be rolling with those at pretty much on a show-to-show basis.
Yeah, so
something along that line. So
yeah, and hopefully we'll get a few more iPhone app reviews out of him, and then we'll find some other role for him to fill in the show because we'd like him to stay on.
I just want to throw the and maybe this is an American thing. I'm not sure, but I just want to throw out that I noticed as that stuff is going through, it's showing all these different beers and the ratings, and that they had drank 7 Full Sail Pale Ales, and they gave, of those 7 Full Sail Pale Ales, they gave that a 2 out of 5 star. So, I mean, at what point does it get to 2 stars, yet you order your 7th?
You're still drinking it.
This was great. Oh, the 7th one was awful. I'm giving it a 2. You know, whoa.
Oh, man, that was close.
Yeah, well done. So, looking forward to drinking the next Native Amber.
Native Amber, looking good.
It's from the earth.
I want to talk a little bit
live.
about... That is where you live. I want to talk a little bit about the holidays. Because Thanksgiving is here in just a few days. And Christmas is going to come and go before we see you again.
And in case my wife asks again, yes, Thanksgiving is on a Thursday this year.
Is it really?
Yes.
Son of a...
You better write that down. I kid, but I don't.
But it's not funny.
So
tragic,
Thanksgiving,
really.
I mean,
So
there's
let's talk
some
about
cool
Thanksgiving.
heritage with beer in Thanksgiving, right?
There is some really neat heritage with beer, and this week's episode was so jam-packed that I didn't really want to... There's only so much I could put in, but I did want to
It's a
talk...
season finale. We can emote. We can stand on our grandstand and talk a little extra.
I didn't do a whole lot of research on Thanksgiving, though, because I knew one thing that I wanted to share with everybody, and that is how the Pilgrims decided that they were going to land at Plymouth Rock. They had been traveling up and down the coast, and were looking for a good spot to land, and Plymouth was not necessarily the best spot, but it was good enough because they needed a spot immediately. They needed to land, and it had nothing to do with the latrine and everything to do with beer.
They were lacking victuals.
They were running out of, quote, victuals, especially beer. And so they landed so that they could erect a brewery. For the very first building they built was a brewery, and that is why they chose Plymouth, is because they needed beer. And in fact, I forget the name of the Native American guy that popped out of the woods when they showed up. Was it Squanto? It was a famous name. It might have been Squanto. I don't know,
I don't know, but I imagine it was, hey!
Yeah, he was like,
he was
what's
going to
going
show
on,
them how to make
guys?
a brewery.
No, he didn't show them how to make a brewery, but he did welcome them in English. And then the second, and you know, that's in all the history books, but the second words out of his mouth were, "Do you have any beer?" Because this particular Native American had developed a taste for beer while traveling up and down the coast with previous English explorers, specifically English beer. He loved it. And that's the reason he came out of the woods to go meet up with the Pilgrims, which, you know, ultimately led to the Native Americans helping the Pilgrims settle and Thanksgiving dinner.
And developing Thanksgiving dinner, and of course having turkey and possibly corn, but you know, that's actually kind of one of those.
That's one of those, you know,
that may not have happened.
May or may
But
not.
they said that you know, one thing I've read, and you know, I don't know how much truth it is, but likely the brewery that they used was, I guess, would you technically still call that a beer, what they made early? Because they probably took some sort of a honey or a syrup or like a sap from a spruce tree or something to make the fermentables.
Because, well, I believe that they brought grain with them.
So they had that too?
Because they knew that they would have to brew beer before they could have a full growing season. So they brought raw grain to mill and make beer out of.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. And then a couple things about Christmas. We all are looking forward to the arrival of St. Nicholas. Good old Santa Claus. And St. Nicholas, actually, is the patron saint of, well, one of many patron saints of brewers.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I just learned that during show research a few weeks ago. And King Wenceslas, who the song is about,
Okay.
King Wenceslas is actually Saint Wenceslas, who is the patron saint of hops. And actually it's a good point that we brought this up earlier. His beloved hops were so valuable that he ordered death for anybody caught exporting his hops out of the country.
And back in this day, they used a lot of things to try to mitigate the sweetness, which is something we're actually going to be not doing in our Brew and Bowl
certainly
Scotch
not.
Ale.
That
We're going
thing's
to be
gonna-
bringing out the sweetness, but they did a lot of things to try to mitigate them, including, adding different berries and twigs and whatever sticks they could put in it, things that they could find that were somewhat bitter. But the thing about hops and what drug it into the mainstream was the fact that not only did it make it more bitter and balance it out, but it preserved it longer. So they could take a beer that they would normally have to drink or, tap a cask, and it would have to be gone in a few days. And now all of a sudden they could be drinking it for several weeks and it's still tasting okay.
So Saint Wenceslas, his hops that he held in such high regard, we actually tasted a little bit of tonight because he invented the Saaz hop.
Ah, that's interesting.
Fun little bit of trivia. I should maybe done that for trivia. I don't know. It was fun though.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let's talk about the Brew and Bowl.
Brew and Bowl. I'm excited. We kicked off our show with the Brew and Bowl. We've always talked about that. For those of you maybe new to the show, we're gonna bring it back up. That's what we do. We tell you what we're gonna tell you. We tell you, then we tell you what we told you.
Oh wait, are we gonna do that later?
What are we gonna do?
Tell them what we told them.
Yeah, I think that's after.
Yes.
It's at the end.
That's when we play us out.
Right, when we play us out. So anyway, the Brew and Bowl Stout is something that we started the show with.
Yeah,
we brewed
Brew
a
and Bowl Stout. It still
beer.
kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, and
I always want to say,
that.
I always have to catch myself.
Right. This year, Brew and Bowl Scotch. We're doing a Scotch Ale. And we decided with the rest of the crew and everybody who came in for the start of the season 1, and we decided that this was the style we wanted to brew.
And I do want to point out that the idea of designing a beer with the audience came from Honky, the iPhone correspondent.
The whitest guy you know.
The whitest guy you know. And so I just wanted to throw that out there real quick before we continue.
So what we do traditionally at this establishment is we drink good beer and we watch good football. Unless you're talking about the Oklahoma A&M game this year, in which we did not watch any good football for about 60 minutes of playing time. And beyond that, we're going to watch, hopefully, the Sooners playing beyond this year.
Let's hope.
Knock on wood, it's looking okay. We still got a tough Aggie game here next week. But what we're going to do is on the day of New Year's Day, we'll brew this beer.
And then we'll watch this beer.
Yes.
Brew this bowl and watch this beer.
We'll brew in the morning, starting kind of early. We usually start somewhere around 6:30 or 7 if we can, because it's going to be colder, so we'll start a little earlier. Maybe do some prep work the night before so that we can get it going. But we'll brew the beer, and we'll get it all ready to go. And then come the day of all of the college bowl games, we'll have brewed a beer. We'll put it all together, and we'll have a bunch of people over. We'll have a good time. We'll drink some more beers that are already made and already in bottles and ready for us to consume, and we'll have a good time with it.
So for this year, as he mentioned, we're doing a Scotch Ale. This was selected by you, the viewing audience, with actually a tremendous amount of help from our studio audience.
Yeah, we had a big studio audience that night.
We still don't have a name for it, do we?
No name.
No,
for the Brew and Bowl
help us
Scotch.
come up with a name. If not, we'll just make one up. Well, I kind of want to stick with. I don't really want to stick with Brew and Bowl Scotch, because it's going to get repetitive. Brew and Bowl Scotch, Brew and Bowl Porter, Brew and Bowl Lager, whatever. So, but
we can call it the Dubliner.
Yeah, we can call it the Dublin. Yeah, because Dublin is the capital of England, which is just south of Scotland.
That's exactly
right. So that
right.
makes a lot of sense.
So maybe that's it, the Dubliner.
No, I don't think that's a very good idea.
I often give him.
How about the Train Spotter?
The Train Spotter, huh?
Yeah. Oh no, that would be heroin. Heroin. Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, it's different.
Whoa.
Different show. He actually does another show on a different radio station.
About heroin snobbery.
Yes.
So if you're into the finer flavors of poppies, Asian poppies that are out there, we can help you out.
He goes into the fine differences between black tar heroin and brown tar heroin,
Right.
and navy tar heroin, for that matter. I don't really know if those things exist.
That's enough. Let's learn more about
We
this
have
damn
really
beer.
derailed. Anyway, if you guys have not looked, www.doglegbrewery.com, we have our recipe online on the main index page, Brew and Bowl Scotch Ale. There's no name for it yet, like we mentioned, but there is a recipe. So go on there, pull off that recipe. You can look at this, tell us what you think, maybe add some...
I haven't looked at this recipe
Yeah,
yet.
you haven't looked at it. But we built it off of recommendations from our studio audience and people that communicated us with via email following the show. That was probably the most input that we got was via email.
One of the things anybody experienced in looking at recipes is going to notice is that we're using an extraordinarily large amount of pale malt with a little bit of crystal and caramel and a little bit of roast. And this is, like we said in an earlier episode, this is the traditional method for brewing Scotch ale, is that they would just roast the grains that wouldn't malt, and then they would just toss them in.
They used
very,
everything.
very economical. And that's kind of what we're going to go with. And then you'll also know extra long boil. And that is to achieve what's called kettle caramelization.
Oh.
We're going to sap the sugars out of the grains, and then we're going to boil them for a really long time, just give them a really nice caramely flavor. And that is why this beer, this particular style, is described as tasting like a dessert when you read the BJCP guidelines.
Because when you brew something long or boil something longer, you're actually caramelizing those sugars, which makes them unfermentable. That's the basic gist of it.
Absolutely.
So since they're unfermentable, they stay in the beer.
And they stay sweet.
Mm-hmm. So you get that extra sweetness. It's why, like a whiskey, like we were talking about earlier, tastes. You get very little sugar flavor from that because it's almost all gone. They've taken it and they've turned all of that sugar content, almost every bit of it. Now, if they turned every bit of it, it would be vodka.
Yeah.
But since they didn't turn every bit of it, it's whiskey, and it adds some flavors from the oak and different kinds of situations like that. But traditionally, with this kind of a beer, you want to keep that from happening. You want to have a low utilization of your malt, low efficiency, as they call it, and you want to have, pretty much a long boil to keep it from getting too dry.
So this is going to be a really neat beer, and we are going to enter it in competition.
Yeah.
This is going to go to the Blue Bonnet Brew Off.
And I think we can do another episode where we'll bottle it.
Yeah,
like
I was just going to say,
I think that was good luck.
That was a lot of fun. Good luck.
Last time we bottled something live, we won first place.
Yeah, we did pretty well.
Yeah.
Did pretty well. So what else are we going to do next season? Because we've got a lot of ideas. Let's throw some of these ideas out there.
One thing we had
as
mentioned,
excited about next season as we are.
Another one of our studio audience frequenters and somebody who's watched the show for quite some time has mentioned that we need to bring some more of the facet of the frat boy in. Sometimes we get too beer snobby. Even tonight, I think we went a little beer snobby.
I think we did, and we always tell you that we're bridging the gap between beer snob and frat boy.
We're not afraid to
We're
drink
not really doing our
Lights.
job here. We're not really bridging the gap. So I think next season you're going to see us kick more into the frat boy thing. You're going to see us chugging Ruination. I think you're going to see some more, maybe some fast food pairings, some other sort of late night victuals.
Yeah. Definitely what beers to get or not to get at Taco Cabana at 2 in the morning.
What beer is going to mix well with your 3 a.m. run to Denny's?
Yeah.
That's my first question.
Yeah. What are you going to slam in the parking lot after your omelet and hash browns 23 different ways?
It's a very good question. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more. I expect some more regular food pairings too. And when I say regular food, I mean other than cheese. We're talking about like some meat pairings, like what's going to go best with your burger, what's going to go really well with your steak, what's really going to go really well with your chicken piccata. I don't know. So we're going to definitely work on some good food
chicken
pairings.
McNuggets.
Chicken McNuggets. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
So
for the
got some of that going on.
32% of chicken that's actually in there, you want to make sure you get a good beer to pair with that 32%. Maybe that's what we need to do. We need to blend a beer for the percentage of actual chicken in a McNugget, like with the so we'll do like a Budweiser is the 85%, and then 15% is a Ruination.
There you go.
There we are.
There it is.
We'll make it happen. It's here. It's there. It's right there.
So we're efforting a really huge interview.
Hopefully Jen will be more popular and more...
too big for us to really go out there and say just yet. But Jen is definitely going to play a bigger part next season.
Yep.
The iPhone correspondent, Honky, is going to play a bigger part. We've got some other interviews. We wanted to have an interview tonight with a guy that developed a Droid app, but we couldn't really make it happen. We're definitely going to make that happen next season.
Yep.
We're going to be trying to bring you more tastings from smaller breweries and just better, just well-produced shows. I mean, we're ready to get this thing going.
Yeah, we're going to have, I think that's probably the gist of it, is you'll see a little more production quality. You're going to see a little bit more. It's easier for us to be a little more dedicated now because we've gotten some of the technical problems solved. It's a lot easier.
Does that mean I'm fired?
Yes.
Yeah.
Richard,
well, and
it's
also going to be easier for us to be more dedicated because football season will be over.
That's true.
I really like it. It works really well that if we do a Bruin Bowl every year, it means half the episodes we don't really have to prepare for, and that gives us more time to watch football.
That's true.
I like that idea.
I do like that idea. And maybe we should have like Honky talk really
Honky.
awkwardly. Like we'll put him on the camera for like 15 minutes and just have him fill dead air by himself.
Good idea.
Write that down.
Write that down.
Uh-huh. Don't have Honky on the show for 15 minutes. There we go. He's written it down.
15 minutes.
So that's what we're going to bring you. Hopefully next season will be a lot of fun. This season was a lot of fun.
Last season, we were just getting things started, trying to figure things out.
Season 0.
I feel like season 1 was a real turning point as far as production quality. We finally know how to broadcast. You know, because we're engineers, we've never broadcasted before. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
but
he knows about drainage. I mean, come on.
Exactly, and he knows how to build stuff. And
that's about it.
So we're there now, and we can bring you a good show. So before we close, let's talk about this native amber a little bit more.
This is just good stuff. We talked about it before.
It's very clean.
It is a very clean beer.
I really like that. It's just extraordinary from beginning to end. You can see the head. It's still holding its head.
Cluster hops is the other one. Now, I've never used cluster in a beer, so I'm guessing that cluster must carry those piney notes, but they definitely use Cascade, which you can taste in the bitterness. You can taste the citrusness. But it says that it's got caramel and biscuit notes, like we talked about. Yeah, we nailed that one. And the Cascade and cluster hops add a wonderful round finish. It's both rich and easy on the palate. I totally agree.
Sorry, I knocked over our paddle.
They call it the native amber because I believe some of the people in the brewery are wanting to get people that are Native Americans in Oklahoma to drink their beer.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because that's a big portion of Oklahoma.
Yeah, that is a pretty big portion of Oklahoma. So if you're in Oklahoma, if you're going to be in Oklahoma or know somebody in Oklahoma, get some Coop. Because it is.
I'm excited that they can. I think that's really cool.
I thought that was really cool too. All their stuff comes in cans,
and that's great. I mean,
so
canning
is next
phenomenal.
season and pretty early next season. We're going to try another Oklahoma brewery called Chalk, which is very. Have you had any Chalk?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is another very good brewery.
I've got a couple
Oklahoma
of their.
Has become a pretty fertile ground for just amazing beer.
Yeah, pretty much those 2 breweries. That's about it. No, there's a couple others that do some pretty good stuff, but no, definitely Coop.
Have you ever been to Old Germany?
Old Germany.
Or Royal Bavaria, which is the one that brews...
The Royal Bavaria, they brew their own. Yeah. Pretty much like nothing over 3% though, right?
Yeah, it's very traditional.
Yeah, but I've heard good things about that place. And anyway, we go through and I'll tell you right now, beyond Coop and Chalk, it's a far cry. The differences in quality. I mean, there are some other brewers out there that do a good job beer to beer. Yeah. So like this one beer will be on top notch, but I think Chalk and Coop are just every beer they make
is great.
It's good stuff. Kind of like our local brewer RAR. We just like the good stuff they make.
So we're gonna see you on New Year's Day.
New Year's Day.
So then, have a happy Thanksgiving.
And a happy Christmas.
Have a happy Christmas, and always remember
a Merry Hanukkah.
A Merry Hanukkah. Thank you very much. A happy Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa.
Is Ramadan coming up?
I'm not sure. Tet should be somewhere.
Yeah,
like,
Tet. I think Tet.
It was a few months ago. It was September, I think.
Enjoy the holidays, everyone. And while you're celebrating the festivities of the holidays, always remember that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home.
Oh, God, that is awful.